Hello there, and thank you again for tuning in to another awesome episode of Cookies Enabled. Today we're going to be talking about the history of video games and where they evolved over the years and the different generations of gaming and where we are now. So stick around and let's see if we can learn something new together. Okay, so we start our history of video games in the 1960s with a group of MIT students that came together and realized that they had the resources on their campus to take all of their campus computers and really bind them together with some programming to recreate the game Risk is essentially what they came up with. Very similar to the game, you had to choose a region and players and select where you wanted them to attack and how many. There was random dice in the game that the computer would generate as well. It was pretty intuitive, but it was not really made for public use, and you really had to be part of the MIT student body to even play the game. So that's our first generation, and during that generation really not much happens. Again, we're going to jump right into the 70s with the Brown Box, which comes out from Sanders Associates in 1971. This gets quickly bought out by Magnavox and gets turned into the Odyssey in 1972. And that becomes the first real home system that you could buy and plug into your TV and actually play a game on. And it really just had table tennis. It didn't have any other real games. I think Pong came out later for that system as well. And as we go on, obviously Atari did come out with Pong just a couple of years later with the Atari 2600, which came out in 1977. And that really begins our second and third generation of gaming, where now you have a slew of games, not just two or three. I can go buy a cartridge, plug it into my system, flick the power switch on, and immediately start playing this game. So that's where our third generation is. And you also have the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, come out as well in this time. And that was a huge step forward. This jumps us right into 1983 and overshadowed what you see with Mattel's Intellivision and the ColecoVision, which had came out kind of as a competitor to the Atari 2600, but didn't really have a good game library. They didn't have much to play with and do, and they just kind of fell behind in the race. And that's where the Nintendo Entertainment System just shined and blew everybody away. So Nintendo's already got big plans. They're about to release their Game Boy in 1989, and that will also revolutionize gaming on a mobile scale, which we're going to keep talking about in other videos. I'm going to have to branch away from that. But that's one reason why Nintendo stayed around, was the Game Boy definitely helped hold their presence in homes, which kind of bridged the gap between the NES and the Super NES, which also came out in 1990, so about 1 year after the Game Boy and almost 5 years after its original release in Japan anyway of the NES. And the Sega, which also started coming out. Sega released their first console, known as the SG-1000, in 1983, and unfortunately it did not do very well. And they released two other versions. The Sega Genesis, which was 1988 to 90, did the best out of all of them by far. And that really pushes us into our fourth generation of gaming, where we're starting to get away from the cartridge and onto discs or CDs. Compact discs were huge. This pushes us right into the PlayStation 1 release, and that came out in 1990, 1994. Right around that time, you have the Super Nintendo coming out as well, which was still cartridge based. And that was, I guess, kind of the biggest competitor to the PlayStation 1 until the Nintendo 64 comes out. And that really propelled Nintendo's future, but again, continued to use cartridge-based games. And really what won over the Nintendo 64 was its game library. It had games like the Star Wars Pod Racer game, GoldenEye for 007, Mario Party, and lots more. Plus, you could have up to 4 controllers. and connect multiple systems together, which was pretty cool. And it wasn't the only one. The PlayStation 1 allowed you to do all of these things, but it also allowed you to play music CDs, some CD videos, which was kind of a fading venue there because DVD came out very soon after. And this bumps us to the 5th generation of gaming, where we start jumping into the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. So we'll jump into that here in just a second. So before I jump further into the 5th generation of gaming, there is one last attempt by Sega to try to really gain the market here in the 4th generation, and that was with the Sega Dreamcast, which came out in 1998 into 99, and really their goal with this was to dominate over the PlayStation 1, which was all CD games and all very interactive with multiple controllers, and this system literally had the ability for you to save games onto a virtual little console and take with you, and you could continue to play your game while you were out and about, which was pretty cool, and then plug it back in and continue to play the game at home. Very few developers came out with games for this, and ironically, right like 2 years after this system comes out, you have the PlayStation 2 enter within the year 2000. So literally 2 years after the Dreamcast comes out, the PlayStation 2 comes out with better graphics, DVD drive, it can play movies, it can play DVD games, it can go online and play with other people. This system blew away the Dreamcast. Plus, it was cheaper than the Dreamcast at launch. So that really made a difference. And that right there is pretty much what killed Sega. Now, I know you're thinking, Sega's still around, I still play Sega games. You're absolutely right. Sega pretty much said, we're not making any more home consoles, we're going to stop doing that, but we are going to continue to make games and release that software for you guys to play. So that's why you still see their name around, and they are still a pretty big gaming company, not going to argue otherwise. But their systems, and the Dreamcast was really, it was way too ahead of its time. If it had a DVD player in it, it would have actually succeeded, but it was a little too late to the race, honestly. So jumping into the 5th generation, you've got your PlayStation 2, which came out first. Then you have Nintendo's GameCube, which came out. And let's backtrack for Nintendo really quick. They actually are the oldest out of the video game industry. Started in 1889, which is the same year that Starry Night was painted. Way back in the day, and they actually started selling game cards, and they're like little collectible cards that you could sell and trade with players, and that was their first game that ever came out. Obviously it wasn't a video game, which is why I didn't mention them before 1960. But when they came out with the GameCube, they decided to follow the DVD format but go with mini DVD, which they did think was going to be taking over, and it never did. And even Sony pushed the mini DVD for a while. It failed very quickly. So the GameCube also did not have a lot of third-party development, because for the first few years Nintendo didn't want third-party companies developing games for it. So because of the lack of game support and the mini DVD pretty much killed the GameCube and almost killed Nintendo. But their mobile devices definitely kept them running. And then to overshadow the GameCube even more, you have a whole new generation coming into the race, which was Microsoft and their Xbox. This came out the last out of that generation, and literally just kind of stumbled into the marketplace because it was big, it was heavy, it was expensive. And it did do everything that the other systems could do as well, including play DVD movies and CD music, stuff like that, connected to the internet. So it was, again, it kind of overshadowed, especially because PC gaming was so big at the time and really taking a massive upswing in that 5th generation that nobody really needed an Xbox, especially if you already had a PlayStation 2 or a GameCube, you didn't really need it. So that's really where our 5th generation kind of ends, and this is almost the death of the arcade as well. We start to see less and less people coming to the arcade to find quality games, and more of it becoming a pastime. Like, I used to go to the arcade, I'm going to go back and relive some of those memories. Our 6th generation of gaming is with the Wii, and that gets introduced in the early 2000s. And really shines because of the fact that it's immersing people into gaming in a different way. using what was called the Wiimote, which looked like a TV remote, but it controlled your movements in the game. So if you're bowling or playing tennis, it would all be scripted over the screen, and that was huge. And this was a pretty big gimmick for a lot of people, and got a ton of people interested in gaming that had never even thought about gaming before. During that same generation, you also have the PlayStation 3 come out, and the PlayStation 3 was a massive, beefy, expensive system that was super powerful. This thing could play the coolest, brightest, best games at the time, but again, it was really expensive and did not have a ton of games or third-party support right at the beginning. Unlike its competitor, which was the Xbox 360, which also came out right around that same time, but came out last out of the three, actually dominated the most, mainly because it had the largest game library and Xbox Live, which connected everybody online, and you didn't have to thus have multiple consoles in one room to connect them all together. You could literally just be in other parts of the world and still play the game together, which had never really happened up to that point as cohesively as the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 had tried in the past. Now, with the 7th generation of gaming, we saw another shift. And really what we saw was, instead of new consoles coming out for both Microsoft and PlayStation or Sony, we saw a new version of, or an upgrade almost, to the hardware. And what they did with the Xbox was they released the Kinect, which is this little guy back here, and he just scans the room for you and you as a player, and allows you to connect to the game literally without having anything in your hands or a controller. You can just move around and run in place kind of thing, and that controls the character on the screen. PlayStation 3 had a setup with the PlayStation camera, or Eye, and you would set that up. They had a little LED bar on it, and you had these special little what looked like Wiimotes, but were really just controllers that were broken into little palms with these blue or purple lights on the end. And those were tracked by the camera, and again allowed you to be virtually in the space of the game. So that's where Sony and Microsoft really tried to kind of take that showcase away from the Wii, and which of course Nintendo decided to shift away from that and try to get back to the core gaming with the Wii U, which had better graphics but still all the backwards compatible features that everybody loved about the Wii. It even still used Wiimotes and whatnot, even though you had a tablet kind of controller that allowed you to use almost as a secondary screen, which was kind of cool. But nobody really utilized this. It wasn't really a sold or solid product. Like, you couldn't play DVD movies on your Wii U. Yeah, you couldn't even watch Netflix for a while. They had to approve all of that later. So that really, really foreshadowed on Nintendo's Wii U, and it did not sell well, unfortunately. The PlayStation 3 and Xbox continued to, or Xbox 360 continued to sell very well until we got into the 8th generation, which is the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now, both the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 had dedicated VR kind of situations. With the Xbox One, you had the Kinect 2.0, which is very similar to the original Kinect, only it had better cameras, better microphones. It could even tell you what your body temperature was and blood rate, or heart rate, based on just scanning your body, which was pretty impressive. The PlayStation 4 had a VR headset you could put on, and that immersed you into the game. And it was very similar to what they did with the PlayStation 3, but it was a way step up in graphical and computing power, which made the game a lot more immersive. Now, the Switch, on the other hand, decided to take kind of a playbook from the Wii and from the Wii U. People loved being able to take that screen with them and wanted to carry it with them everywhere they went. So that's where the idea for the Switch came from. They took the Wiimote and crammed it onto the side of a screen and became the Switch. And that's literally what we have to this day. Now, our 9th gen is what just came out, which is PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and they are awesome machines, all focused primarily on graphical polishing power, ray tracing, beautiful graphics. And Nintendo loves beautiful graphics, but really wants to focus on gameplay, game content, the story of the game. And that's one reason why I like Breath of Wild 2 and those kind of foreshadowed games that could be coming out very soon are really, really exciting for people, and usually do a little more of a sale than what you'd see for the PlayStation Series X, where they're just pushing glorified, these amazing graphics and this car looks super realistic. They're not wrong. They're absolutely dead on right. But, you know, that's not all about the video game experience. So, again, 9th gen is kind of a combination of a huge processor and graphic card upgrades that allow us to visually see things that we never could do in video games before, and experience realistic worlds like we had never been able to do until now. So what did we learn today? Well, we learned that really our 9th generation, which is our current one, we have the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, and I definitely want to make the prediction that Nintendo will definitely have a pro version of the Switch out, probably by the Christmas season of 2021. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We do know that Nintendo saw a huge uptake in sales because of Animal Crossing over the stay-at-home order. That game was pushed through to be released way ahead of time, and it came out great. Everybody loved it. It's been a huge success, and it bridged a lot of gaps in the gaming industry, and it definitely gave Nintendo a lot of good attention. And I definitely think we're going to see a lot pull away from digital media, and we're going to see more online downloading instead of having to get a disc or a cartridge to put into the machine to get it to play the game. I think that's really where we're going to go in the future, but I definitely don't think home consoles will be going away anytime soon. But again, I hope you guys learned something, and I thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe at the bottom of the page, and if you have any questions or comments, don't forget to leave those as well. I can't wait to read them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Really, and try to get into... Actually, I'm going to start that over again here. That was not very good, so... Man, there were so many different stupid machines back in the day. Like, Sega had the Sega CD, and that had like a base Sega machine, and then you plugged that on top of this, and you plugged this on top of that, and then they each had their own power cords, and I mean, it was such a rigmarole. I don't really understand what the point was, except for that they could make more money by selling more hardware is really the only thing I could think of. But I think there was maybe like a handful of actual games that you could even play on that stupid Sega CD thing. Even Nintendo 64 had expansion slots. PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, they've all had expansion slots. The Xbox One did not have any expansions. I think GameCube was the first one that had 3 different expansions on the bottom. One was for a modem, one was for RAM, and I don't remember what that other one was. There was maybe the other one was for audio. But anyway, there was all these different expansion cards and things you could get for your consoles and stuff. I swear they were just trying to make a ton of extra money on stuff that didn't really improve the gaming aspect of the console at all. There's only one time I remember them forcing you to get it, which was the 64. You had to get the expansion slot for certain games. But I think Final Fantasy for the PlayStation 2, there was an expansion you had to get for that one too. But I could be wrong. Anyway, glad that stupid stuff's over with. Ugh.